not going to be a very long video, so we're just looking at one question. Okay, so turn to page 80. Page 80. Everybody with me? We're looking at the third question. In preparation for these discussions with non-Christians, what would you say if one of them responds to you by asserting you really can't believe the New Testament because the writers were a bunch of brainwashed followers of Jesus who thought he was the Messiah, and after he died they concocted a story that Jesus rose from the dead and declared him the Savior of the world? Now, first of all, when you have conversations with people who don't know Christ, how does Peter say we are to conduct those conversations? With what? No? Yeah.
Gentleness.
Gentleness is one of them. What's the other one? Respect. So do so. Always be ready to give the reason for the hope that lies within you, but do so with gentleness and respect. And we'll talk more about this next year, but if you get into a conversation with someone about Jesus and it becomes an argument, you're doing more harm than good. We are to be winsome. We are to be welcoming, and gentle, and respectful. Nobody was ever argued into the kingdom of God, and so that's how we're to respond. So when you answer this question, I don't want you saying snarky things like, you idiot, how can you look at that? It doesn't represent Christ, but also it will have the opposite effect of what you want to have. How would you respond to this claim that the disciples were brainwashed and probably definitely upset when he died, but then when he died, then they concocted the resurrection. They made the story up. So what's one thing you would say in response to that?
Many of the Gospels were written while, yes, Christ had risen, or on back up. I can't think of the word.
Ascended.
Thank you. But many of the witnesses were still alive when the time was written, and they used historical figures, and you can't get away with using historical figures and making fake stories about them.
Right. Right. But Paul says, in your memory verses that, he appeared to more than 500 witnesses at one time. Most of whom are still alive, but some have fallen asleep, some have died. And essentially he's saying that go ask one of the eyewitnesses, even at the time that 1 Corinthians was written, and Mark was written before 1 Corinthians. There were eyewitnesses there that could have and would have debunked it. It never would have gotten off the ground. It couldn't have. There were too many people who knew the truth. Everyone who didn't believe in the resurrection believed that Jesus' body was not in the grave. They just didn't believe he rose. They believed that they went to the wrong tomb or that the disciples stole the body. But none of them would say the disciples made it up because they knew the tomb was empty. What else would you say? Yeah.
There wasn't really anything that the disciples gained from making up.
And it wasn't just that they wouldn't gain. What happened to them because they refused to repent the story. Horrible deaths. Some were crucified. Early church history says that Peter was crucified upside down, that he chose to be crucified upside down because he didn't want to be killed in the same manner as his Lord. I don't know if that's true. That's not a very early attestation, but we do know that Paul was probably beheaded. That was Rome's favorite way of martyring people. And we know that under Nero, thousands of Christians lost their lives once Nero, I think it's about AD 68, that he started his, and Paul would have been dead by then. And maybe most of the apostles other than John would have been dead by then. But he did horrible things. Used live followers of Christ as torches at his parties. He lit them on fire, and they were the torches at his parties. Just horrific things. If you were in a position to know for a fact whether it was true or false, would you maintain that story even to death? I've admitted to things for far less dire reasons, right? Even just, the threat of punishment. I don't know if your parents told you this. My parents told me this. And I've told my children this. That if you tell me the truth, it will go better for you. If you lie to me, and then I find out, it will go worse for you. And what reason would they have to lie about that? Usually we lie to get out of something, or to make ourselves look better, or to make our situation better. But we don't lie so that we can get in trouble. We might get in trouble for it, but we don't do it for that reason. Anything else? What about the brainwashing thing, that the disciples were brainwashed? What evidence do we have that they were in their right minds? Yeah.
Maybe the fact that Luke was a doctor and he obviously believed them and confirmed what they said, so he'd be more credible than the average person.
They also didn't make anything sound crazy or dramatic. Kind of just wrote down what happened. Add a bunch of stuff that's
Right, it's not like the Gnostic Gospels where you have, this huge cross and Jesus's head reaches to the clouds, and he's carrying this huge cross, and obviously things that are fantastical, right, and not real. And often in brainwashing, like, let's take a cult for example. I don't know if you've heard about this. I think it was probably it might have been before you were born. But there was this cult that they all took their own lives. And they all were wearing the exact same clothing, like it was like khaki pants and a red shirt and the same white tennis shoes. And they all got into their bunk beds in their compound, and they took cyanide and died because they believed that if they did that Martians from outer space would come take them away to heaven, essentially to paradise. That's crazy, right? A man rising from the dead is impossible physically, but it's not the same thing as Martians taking you away in a spaceship. And so they weren't making those sorts of claims that someone who's been brainwashed would make. They seemed to be perfectly sane. And I would include Paul in that as well. And the author of Hebrews, Betsy. I'm not sure there's ever been a person more brilliant than the author of Hebrews. It makes my brain spin. So deep. Anything else? So your quiz over this chapter is this Friday. It was going to be, I think it's going to be Wednesday. But it's going to be Friday. Okay? So I won't give it on. And I will write that on the board. And it's exactly what your study guide says it is. You need to list all of them, and then you're going to pick a few of them that you want to explain. That's it. That's the quiz.